Genesis chapter 18. Then the Lord appeared to him by the terebinth trees of Mamre, as he was sitting in the tent door in the heat of the day. So he lifted his eyes and looked, and behold, 3 men were standing by him. And when he saw them, he ran from the tent door to meet them, and bowed himself to the ground and said, My Lord, if I have now found favor in your sight, do not pass on by your servant. Please let a little water be brought, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree. And I will bring a morsel of bread, that you may refresh your hearts. After that you may pass by, inasmuch as you have come to your servant. They said, Do as you have said. So Abraham hurried into the tent to Sarah and said, Quickly, make ready 3 measures of fine meal, knead it and make cakes. And Abraham ran to the herd, and took a tender and good calf, gave it to a young man, and he hastened to prepare it. So he took butter and milk and the calf, which he had prepared, and set it before them. And he stood by them under the tree as they ate. Then they said to him, Where is Sarah your wife? So he said, Here in the tent. And he said, I will certainly return to you according to the time of life. And behold, Sarah your wife shall have a son. Sarah was listening in the tent door, which was behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, well advanced in age, and Sarah had passed the age of childbearing. Therefore Sarah laughed within herself. After I have grown old, shall I have pleasure, my Lord being old also? And the Lord said to Abraham, Why did Sarah laugh, saying, Shall I bear a child since I am old? Is anything too hard for Jehovah the Lord? At the appointed time I will return to you according to the time of life, and Sarah shall have a son. But Sarah denied it, saying, I did not laugh, for she was afraid. But he said, No, but you did laugh. Then the men arose from there and looked toward Sodom, and Abraham went with them to send them on the way. And the Lord said, Shall I hide from Abraham what I am doing? Since Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. For I have known him, in order that he may command his children and his household after him, that they keep the way of the Lord, to do righteousness and justice, that the Lord may bring to Abraham what he has spoken to him. And the Lord said, Because the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grave, I will go down now and see whether they have done altogether according to the outcry against it that has come to me. And if not, I will know. Then the men turned away from there and went toward Sodom. But Abraham still stood before the Lord. And Abraham came near and said, Would you also destroy the righteous with the wicked? Suppose there were 50 righteous within the city. Would you also destroy the place and not spare it for the 50 righteous that were in it? Far be it from me. Far be it from you to do such a thing as this, to slay the righteous with the wicked, so that the righteous should be as the wicked. Far be it from you. Shall not the judge of all the earth do right? So the Lord said, If I find in Sodom 50 righteous within the city, then I will spare all the place for their sakes. Then Abraham answered and said, Indeed now, I who am but dust and ashes have taken it upon myself to speak to the Lord. Suppose there were 5 less than the 50 righteous. Would you destroy all of the city for lack of 5? So he said, If I find there 45, I will not destroy it. And he spoke to him yet again and said, Suppose there should be 40 there. So he said, I will not do it for the sake of 40. Then he said, Let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak. Suppose 30 should be found there. So he said, I will not do it if I find 30 there. And he said, Indeed now I have taken it upon myself to speak to the Lord. Suppose 20 should be found there. So he said, I will not destroy it for the sake of 20. Then he said, Let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak but once more. Suppose 10 should be found there. And he said, I will not destroy it for the sake of 10. So the Lord went his way as soon as he had finished speaking with Abraham, and Abraham returned to his place. Now the 2 angels came to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom. When Lot saw them, he rose to meet them, and he bowed himself with his face toward the ground. And he said, Hear now, my lords, please turn into your servant's house and spend the night and wash your feet. Then you may rise early and go on your way. And they said, No, but we will spend the night in the open square. But he insisted strongly. So they turned into him and entered his house. Then he made them a feast and baked unleavened bread, and they ate. Now before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both old and young, all the people from every quarter, surrounded the house. And they called to Lot and said to him, Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out that we may know them carnally. So Lot went out to them through the doorway, shut the door behind him, and said, Please, my brethren, do not do so wickedly. See now, I have 2 daughters who have not known a man. Please let me bring them out to you, and you may do to them as you wish. Only do nothing to these men, since this is the reason they have come under the shadow of my roof. And they said, Stand back. Then they said, This one came in to stay here, and he keeps acting as a judge. Now we will deal worse with you than with them. So they pressed hard against the man Lot and came near to break down the door. But the men reached out their hands and pulled Lot into the house with them and shut the door. And they struck the men who were at the doorway of the house with blindness, both small and great, so that they became weary trying to find the door. Then the men said to Lot, Have you anyone else here? Son-in-law, your sons, your daughters, and whomever you have in the city. Take them out of this place. For we will destroy this place, because the outcry against them has grown great before the face of the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it. So Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-law, who had married his daughters, and said, Get up, get out of this place, for the Lord will destroy this city. But to his sons-in-law he seemed to be joking. When the morning dawned, the angels urged Lot to hurry, saying, Arise, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, lest you be consumed in the punishment of the city. And while he lingered, the men took hold of his hand, his wife's hand, and the hands of his 2 daughters, the Lord being merciful to him, and they brought him out and set him outside the city. So it came to pass, when they had brought them outside, that he said, Escape for your life. Do not look behind you, nor stay anywhere in the plain. Escape to the mountains, lest you be destroyed. Then Lot said to them, Please, no, my lords. Indeed, now your servant has found favor in your sight, and you have increased your mercy, which you have shown me by saving my life. But I cannot escape to the mountains, lest some evil overtake me and I die. See now, this city is near enough to flee to, and it is a little one. Please let me escape there. Is it not a little one? And my soul shall live. And he said to him, See, I have favored you concerning this thing also, in that I will not overthrow this city for which you have spoken. Hurry, escape there, for I cannot do anything until you arrive there. Therefore the name of the city was called Zoar. Then the Lord rained brimstone and fire on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of the heavens. So he overthrew those cities, all the plain, all the inhabitants of the cities, and what grew on the ground. But his wife looked back behind him, and she became a pillar of salt. And Abraham went early in the morning to the place where he had stood before the Lord. Then he looked toward Sodom and Gomorrah, and toward all the land of the plain. And he saw, and behold, the smoke of the land, which went up like the smoke of a furnace. And it came to pass, when God destroyed the cities of the plain, that God remembered Abraham, and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow. Then when he overthrew the cities in which Lot had dwelt. I'm going to pause there. We have a number of interesting things happening in the story. One is, the story begins with Abraham resting by his tent under a tree. And 3 men come walking up to him. And he acknowledges one of them to be whom? The Lord. Not only does he acknowledge one of them to be the Lord, Yehovah, but we are told by God that that's who he is. So we don't have to here doubt whether Abraham got it wrong somehow. Okay? Because sometimes people do make error, right? We have other instances throughout the scriptures where if you read the book of Revelation, John falls down and worships the angel. What's the angel say to him? Don't do that. I'm not God. I'm just, don't worship me like that. Worship only God that way, right? So, when men get it in error, people who are genuinely worshiping the Lord of their lives, and they make an error, God corrects them. In this case, we not only don't find correction, we find reinforcement by God that this is who one of these men are. Now this creates a little bit of a problem for some people. Why would this be a little bit of a problem for some people?
God in the flesh.
Say what you mean.
Well, I just mean it's God appearing as a person in the flesh, not as a spirit.
Right. That's one reason why. Why else might some people have a problem with this particular...
There's a verse they take out of context in the New Testament. I don't remember exactly where it is, but it says that no one had seen the Lord at any time. That if anyone was to see the Lord, they would die.
Right. And so only in context can these things make sense to us. God, who is the creator of heaven and earth, who is omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent, and capable of doing anything according to his will, has demonstrated his creative power, making everything from the greatest of the cosmos down to the finest of the atomic particles that make up our cell structure of plants and living systems, and, for that matter, non-living systems. He is also demonstrating that he is able to, of himself, limit himself to a degree to appear to men in particular cases, at particular times, in particular ways. And in this case, since he is the creator of all mankind, he's certainly capable of coming and appearing as a man. And that he does. But here's what's interesting. Here's what's really interesting. Why does Abraham acknowledge, why does he greet him as Yehovah, Lord? Because he'd seen him before, you see. This is not the first time it's happened. And this is familiarity being expressed between the two. And God even expands on that familiarity as he goes forward in the reservation of his word, what he's reserved for us, for the purpose of our instruction and our learning. He wants us to understand that this is the type of relationship he wants to have with us, a relationship of familiarity. And this relationship of familiarity is of great benefit to whom? Us. Yeah. What does God get out of the deal? We can't add anything to what he already has, right? He doesn't need anything. We sang a song about that this morning. Okay? And that's a very true song. He already has everything possible. Except what he's given to us. What's that one thing? Our freedom of choice, our free will. That's the one thing he's given to us to have complete autonomy over for a time. There will come a time when that autonomy will cease. And then he will take back from us the ability to make a choice, especially if it's to our detriment. So the Lord appeared to him by the terebinth trees, starting back in the beginning of 18, verse 1. And he was sitting in the tent doorway of the heat. What does Abraham do when he greets the Lord? What's the first thing he is interested in doing?
Taking care of it.
Yeah. Some people will ascribe this to Eastern cultural hospitality. However, we have zero records that Eastern cultural hospitality was alive and well in 2500 BC. Okay? So, we look at today's Eastern cultural hospitality and we say, oh, because of the uniformitarian principle, we expect it was that way all the time. Well, that's not the case. Because uniformitarian principles have been proven over and over and over again to not be accurate. Plus, it's just a hypothesis. We have no evidence that that was the case. So why then do you think, if you were reading this passage on your own, why do you think Abraham would respond in such a way?
Well, he recognizes him as the Lord. If you truly were, if God were to truly come into your presence, what would you not do for the Lord?
Right. Now, who's Abraham at this time? What's his standing, his status?
Very rich, childless man.
Yeah, very rich, very wealthy, very well thought of, however childless at the moment. And powerful man. What did he already demonstrate that he could do?
Destroy kings.
Destroy kings. Raise an army, right? Gather allies. You see, he was very influential, really at the top crust of the culture and society. And what does he demonstrate when the Lord comes into his presence?
Humility.
Great humility. That's exactly right. It's the same thing we all should be able to demonstrate, not just in the presence of the Lord, but this is an exercise for us to understand that no matter where we are in society, status, culture, anything else, we all need to be able to demonstrate humility toward one another. And what does he do? He goes out and tells his wife to get the leftovers out of the fridge and goes out and gets the lamest animal they have because they were going to kill it anyway. You follow? To demonstrate this kind of humility and hospitality, we don't give God our leftovers. And we don't give him what's convenient and what's easy. We read right through in a couple of sentences the following. So Abraham hurried into the tent to Sarah and said, quickly, make ready 3 measures of fine meal, knead it and make cakes. And Abraham ran to the herd, took a tender and good calf, gave it to a young man, and he hastened to prepare it. So he took butter and milk, the calf which had been prepared, and set it before them. And he stood by them under the tree as they ate. How many seconds did that take me to read? What kind of effort and labor is this describing? Yeah. Yeah. Where did they meet him to begin with?
Under the tree.
Under the tree, resting in the heat of the day. He could have said, oh, God, it's too hot. Can I do this later?
No.
That's right. The answer is no. The answer is we put ourselves aside in deference to others. He was demonstrating this. You see, he's demonstrating a lot of things that he is learning about how God has designed his life by this relationship he has with God. This is a very important facet for each and every one of us. It's important that we pay close attention and that we learn. It's not satisfactory to continue to hear and not be doers of the will and the word of the Lord. Matter of fact, that puts us in a worse position than those who had never heard. It's critical that the things the Lord teaches us, we are humble enough to receive to begin with. And secondly, we are to be taught by him, not to be trying to teach him or convince him of anything. Despite Abraham's negotiating tactics here that we're going to look at. And the Lord makes a statement. Anybody have any idea about how old Abraham and Sarah are at this point?
Abraham's 99.
Yeah, and they're about 10 years apart, 99 and 89. And so, these are not young folks. And God appears to them to do what? Not to finish, not to fulfill yet. What's he going to do?
Tell them.
He's testing.
Well, he's not asking him anything at this point yet. He's promising him once again, right? What is he doing? Reaffirming his promise and commitment. He's reaffirming it. He's reaffirming it by showing up in person and by bringing it to his attention again. When did he start telling him all this was going to happen? How long has Abraham been waiting since the first time this was promised? No? Any ideas?
How old was he when he came to him? 80? 80.
Yeah.
Go with 40. Everything's 40 in the
Okay, let's go back.
19 years.
Let's go back.
When he was 75.
Yes, sir. So, doing the math, carry the 12. Yeah, you see, he began, when he spoke to Abraham at the first time, 24 years ago. How many of us would be patient enough to see God fulfill his promise after 24 years?
I almost think you understand why Sarah laughed.
What is the most notorious person in the Bible who is thought of as having extremely great patience? Job, right? The common quote is what? Have the patience of Job. You see, and it is a complete misnomer in our modern language. Because Job did nothing like waiting around doing nothing to see if God was going to do something. But that's how we process that information of having the patience of Job. You see, the term patience, when that phrase was coined, comes out of the old King James translation. What did the term patience mean way back when? Long suffering. Yes, spoken by my youngest friend here. And that's exactly correct. That's why we misunderstand, because we take an old colloquialism and we process it with modern language and we miss it. So it's important that we do the labor and the process to slow down a little bit and find out the context that Alex was talking about earlier of the lessons God is teaching us. And to some degree, we can't do that. We don't have enough record to make it finite for us to understand the culture 2500 BC, 4,500 years ago. So we can't fully immerse ourselves into that condition or that situation. But we do have aids that will help us get close. The question is, are we going to be bothered enough to try to pick up those aids to do the work properly to understand what God's trying to communicate to us? That's what's important. And it takes work. It takes time. It takes energy. It takes purpose. It takes investment. It takes sacrifice. And the Lord tells Abraham, I will certainly return to you according to the time of life, and behold, Sarah, your wife, shall have a son. Verse 10. It's going to happen, Abraham. I've told you before it's going to happen. I've told you more than once before it's going to happen. I'm back here telling you it's going to happen. And guess what? It's going to happen next time. You ever get close to getting something accomplished, but you're not quite there, and you can see the finish line, and it changes things within you, changes things within your mind, within your heart, your drive. As you get closer to the end, you get more excited, or in some cases more trepidatious, right? More afraid, especially if it's negative consequences. Right? When you were a kid and you did something wrong and Mom said, wait till your dad gets home, you weren't as nervous as any other time of the day till Dad walked in that door, right? Especially those of you who are older and parents still discipline their kids. So, this is what the Lord's doing. He's trying to tell him, it's very close now, Abraham. It's going to happen. Why now did God wait till Abraham was 99 and Sarah 89 to bring forth what he's going to do? Say it louder.
Another miracle.
Yeah, of course. This is God demonstrating what he says here later. Is anything too hard for the Lord? You see, it's not trust in the Lord when something happens that by our natural senses we think will naturally happen anyway. Nobody looks at that as miraculous. Nobody does. Yet we should step back and realize that what we consider to be natural occurrences are miracles every day. What is the power that holds atomic particles together?
We don't know.
We don't know. The answer is God. What happens when atoms split?
It's a really big explosion.
Yes, that's correct. But we take for granted every day atomic particles clinging together, don't we? As simple as that. And we could go on for days making a description of this, and we don't consider all of that miraculous. Here, God is making it so it's very clear. He's going to excuse all the possibilities of the natural senses being able to rationalize and justify this event. You see, Abraham's already made the error of thinking that he was to do something in the flesh and accomplish God's promise by natural events. So God eliminates the possibility for that to happen, to demonstrate that there is a big difference, not a small difference. Matter of fact, they're antipolar. The works of the divine person of God and the works of the flesh of man. This is the purpose of why he's doing this. And guess what he's going to use to bring forth reconciliation of those two antipoles? But the two very things that are opposed to one another. The divinity of God and his power and his might, and the flesh of people who are well past the age of being able to produce offspring. And God's going to bring life into deadness, which God only can do. Now, what's the condition for God bringing this forth? Does he state a condition?
Implied.
Well, let's see. Let's read verse 19 once again. God speaking to the angels about Abraham. For I have known him in order that he may command his children and his household after him, that they keep the way of the Lord, to do righteousness and justice, that the Lord may bring to Abraham what he has spoken to him. Was it conditional?
Yes.
Unequivocally conditional. Is God ever give us a promise of a blessing to us without conditions? Nope. Apart from the covenant God made of the rainbow coming to designate that he's never going to flood the earth again, there is no other covenant that I can think of that God speaks about at any time that is not conditional. And that man's participation, according to God's design, not our design, is the hinge pin. It's that which conditions God being able to do what he wants to do, which is what? Bless us. That's what he wants to do. The condition is our agreement with him. How did Abraham demonstrate that he would be in agreement with God? What does he say here? Why does God say he knew Abraham? What does he want from Abraham in return?
He keeps the ways of the Lord and instructs his children in the ways of the Lord.
And not just tell them, but what's the follow-on? That not only he would be an example, but he would assure that they would what?
Be a witness to God.
That they would be doers of righteousness and justice. Was it just his children?
No.
Is it just his offspring from his biology? His household. What does this mean in this term, household? Every servant, every person that lived under his care. Without exception. Didn't matter where they came from. You see, this is God telling us already that he's going to bring both Jew and Gentile together as one in Christ. Because where were all of the servants from Abraham? From all Gentile nations, with rare exception. And when you read about them, you hear about some of these servants who were in fact Gentiles. And what did God want from these Gentile servants? But they would learn from the one that God had known. And what was that person's produce supposed to be? But to invest in those who don't know God, so that he would do what? He would make disciples, just as Jesus says. To go forward and teach them the things he has commanded us to do, and to teach them to do those things he's commanded us to do. That's the essence of making a disciple. And so, yes, it was very important that Abraham understood the reality of the promise of God, and every promise of God that is of this form comes to us with condition. I'll briefly read to you a passage in Jeremiah 18. Verses 7 through 10. The instant I speak concerning a nation and concerning a kingdom, to pluck it up, to pull down, and to destroy it. If that nation against whom I have spoken turns from its evil, I will relent of the disaster that I thought to bring upon it. And the instant I speak concerning a nation and concerning a kingdom to build and to plant it, if it does evil in my sight so that it does not obey my voice, then I will relent concerning the good with which I said I would benefit it. That same or similar statement is made ad nauseum throughout God's Word. He wants us to understand that all of the blessings of God come with a condition. That condition is to, as we phrase here, and you've heard me say probably more times than some of you want to hear, is to abide in Christ. This is why Jesus makes these statements that he makes, that we record from John chapter 15. And why it's so important to grasp that if I abide in him, he will abide in me. And what do I get in the benefit? I get the very presence of the living God dwelling in me to renew my mind, transform my heart, and turn me into the person that God has designed me to be. In what case would I ever consider to not command my children and my household after me, not keep the way of the Lord, not to do justice and righteousness?
There is none.
Unless I depart from him, there is none. You see, unless I depart from him, there is none. Now, an interesting point here is the Lord speaking to Abraham, and he tells him about the promise that is to come, that he is going to have a son, and it will be this time next year. And Sarah laughs. What happens when the Lord asks her why she laughed? Right? Now, what does the Lord demonstrate he does after she responds inappropriately? She lies. A defensive mechanism just comes out. She has a reaction of defensiveness. What does he demonstrate that he does? He corrected her. That's exactly right. And he actually confronts her and Abraham. No, you did actually do this. What do we most commonly do in our culture when things like this happen?
We're taught in a lot of cases to just let it slide once it's a really big deal. It's not worth the discomfort, trouble.
Right.
Well, there's not that anything's insignificant, but there's a lot of significance in God just keeping His word. I mean, He told Abraham back this was going to happen. He's confirming it, and He's stating the fact, no, you did, it's going to happen. I mean, I wouldn't say He didn't have a choice. As God, this is going to happen. And matter of fact, I guess that's the word I'm looking for. It's a matter of fact. So reconcile that, you just kind of, I guess he's telling her, confirming to her, or what do I call it?
You're on the right track. Keep going.
I mean, he's telling Sarah, no, this is going to take place. Even though you laughed, it doesn't change the fact that you are going to have a child in 9 months, and you're going to know that pretty quick that it's going to, Sarah doesn't have it, she's going to find out pretty quick that, oh, look at me, I guess I was wrong, and then you're going to be embarrassed and ashamed before the Lord for what you stated.
So why does the Lord, you think, confront her? Why not, Alex, just let it go? Why do you think He picks it up?
In my opinion, the biggest reason for stopping and confronting her, the Lord makes it very clear, do not lie. And so if she's lying, and if He doesn't confront it and do something about it, then God is being a hypocrite. We're supposed to, if we know our brother is in sin, depending on sin, we need to confront it. We can't sit back and say, oh, well, it's fine, it'll work itself out. If you know your brother is in sin and you do nothing about it, then God says his sin is on you. So God is, in one way, reaffirming that, no, we need to take this serious. Do not sin. And I would also look at it like, why laugh at God?
Okay, so hang on before we go on. So your first point, what did God tell him was the condition of his blessing? What did God tell Abraham was the condition of his blessing?
That you and your family walk in the faith and practice it.
And practice it. So how is God going to demonstrate that if he drops the ball right in the midst of the opportunity? Okay, that's your point number one. Yes, ma'am.
I think the other thing, too, is that I think even though, I made it funny about Sarah laughing, and some of us could probably identify with after 25 years, but obviously her faith had diminished. And so that's why she scoffed, She, at that point, she was like, seriously? Kind of thing. And so you can kind of understand, but obviously something there was lacking for her not to believe what the Lord said when he said that.
That's exactly right.
Well, he's also demonstrating his omniscience, because she doesn't like it.
Well, to say...
It's a time thing there that we don't get the full picture. At one point, Sarah's in the tent. She could be out serving bread right now or whatever, and she kind of laughs to herself, not an out laugh, but we don't know the time frame. You can't understand, because he couldn't address her if she's in the tent.
Well, let me address that subject this way, and then I want to talk about what Tiffany just said. The Lord said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh? And Sarah responds, I didn't laugh. Could Sarah hear the conversation that was taking place? Of course. So then, at the same point, if she had a spontaneous, involuntary response that came out, when you guys chuckle, you do this. If you don't, you guys are all much better than I am. I'll snort or giggle or whatever when somebody does something, and it just happens. Just like Lee just did. So he has the same disease I do. And this is what happens. So within ourselves we have the thoughts, but guess what comes out? You see? Some kind of a noise often comes out. This is very easily what the Lord could have picked up. But you're also correct. It could have simply been his omniscience making the declaration. Don't want to discount that, but it's also not very improbable that he heard something, and that's why he asked Abraham the question. the Lord's demonstrating his concern is not so much the letter of the law that she lied, and she did, and he has to practice righteousness and justice, otherwise he's not God. That's settled. But what's his biggest concern is the person, Sarah.
Right.
That's his biggest concern, because guess what she's demonstrating is she sees God as being this big. You see, God is only capable of certain things in Sarah's mind. And what God is trying to do is help her understand the greatness of him that is well beyond her present capacity to embrace. Now, here's something we all have to come to grips with at some point. We will never, ever, ever, ever in eternity get the full understanding of the fullness of God, because we're never going to be God. Okay? We're going to get closer and closer, and God has purpose for us to learn more and more and grow more and more and expand and develop and understand. But that's what he's demonstrating here with Sarah, is his desire to want her to do that. And how does he do it? By ignoring the situation or by handling the situation? You see, we sometimes want to make excuse and not handle the situation because we think it's wise, but God here demonstrating, at least in this particular case, and understand, it's not all cases. There is no book out there where we can sit here and list, in this circumstance you do this, and in that circumstance you do that, because God demonstrates at times walking away and confrontation. And they sound very similar in nature to the circumstance. So how do we decide which one to do?
We don't.
Listening to the Holy Spirit.
No, we do have a decision we have to make. Remember the one thing he gives us?
We can decide by his word. But other than that, it's exactly what it says. Listen to the Holy Spirit.
That's right. You have to be led by the Holy Spirit to do something. At the end of the day, this is part of the role of the Holy Spirit in our lives, to have the privilege and the opportunity to lead us to do that which is consistent with his word, which is the definition of righteousness and justice. It's defined no other way. I cannot make up my own definition and call it righteousness and justice if I ignore or put off some part of what God has defined it as. I then malign the words of righteousness and justice and do injustice to them. And that's why it's so important to have both of those pieces working together, the two persons of God, Father, or Son and Holy Spirit, to get us to walk in ways that will please our Father in heaven. The Lord comes and tells him he's come to destroy some people. Our great, loving, wonderful, easygoing, lackadaisical, long-suffering, however people want to somehow box him up, he has come to destroy some people. He's already demonstrated that he's capable of this, right? Do you think there's anybody on the planet at this time that does not know the story of the flood from Noah's time?
Especially not after Russell Crowe's movie.
I didn't mean at this present time. I meant at Abraham's time. Or did they have movies back then?
They had stories.
Yeah, of course. Everyone knew the story. But some people had thrown it off. And see, what was the other part of the story that they had heard? What do you think Abraham told them? Or, not Abraham. What do you think Noah told his sons and what his sons would have repeated? You remember the whole story is God comes and promises to bring the flood, 100 years of building the ark and preaching the gospel to the people, which they wholly reject except for his wife, 3 sons, and their wives. By the way, how many people is that? 8. It would take a minimum of how many to save the city? 10.
Yeah.
You understand why the world wasn't saved. What was the other part that Noah, Shem, and Ham, and Japheth would have passed on? What did God say that he would what? Never again flood the earth. So guess what some people thought that meant? They could do whatever they wanted because God now was shackled from being able to bring consequences in their life. That's exactly what takes place here. And Sodom and Gomorrah become abominable places. And we read in the story how abominable they are. And we see a man risk himself and his family to protect those who had come under his roof for care. And some of this story is difficult for us to process because it's taught from a very Eastern perspective, Central Eastern perspective. We become aghast by the fact that this man would offer his 2 daughters to this mob. And oftentimes we are so offended by that we miss the point of the story because we don't have the cultural sensitivities of the storyteller's perspective from the Eastern cultures.
He's trying to save.
You see. And what did they declare about Lot? What did they declare was his presence among them and his conduct among them? What was he doing that God had told Abraham that he must do with his family and his household? That's what Lot was doing. And we read in the book of Hebrews that Lot was a man whose soul was vexed, being amongst all the iniquity day and night. And so what does God do? He sends 2 messengers. How many people went to Sodom?
3.
No, sir. How many people went to Sodom?
2.
2.
3.
2 angels that God sends goes to Sodom. They're not ninja warriors like the series tried to portray them to be. They were angels. Okay? And had been given by God supernatural divine powers to blind the mob outside the door. For the purpose of doing what?
Allowing Lot and his family to escape.
Protecting Lot and those in his home to start with. That's the first purpose of the blinding, right? The next series of events is purposed for his mercy and rescue. So the angels declare to him what? Not the words exactly.
Do you have anybody
What?
else?
Not the words exactly. What did the angels declare?
We're going to destroy this land.
Yes, but those are the words. What they declared was the word of the Lord. They were messengers from God. And they gave him nothing else. They added nothing to and subtracted nothing from. This is what the Lord has determined. Isn't that how they began? This is what the Lord has determined. This is what you must understand. Like it or not, this is what the Lord has determined. And then he gives them the details. Why is it so important they started with that? Why is it so important to make sure that that was important, that Lot would understand this?
That's the word of the Lord.
Do we have any indication in here that Lot knows who these men are yet?
Yes.
How?
When they came to him, he went out to him first and greeted him.
But that would be a very common treatment in the Eastern cultures.
Did they think he appeared to them as angels? Because he said there were angels walking in.
We have no record that Lot recognizes these are yet, as of yet.
Well, he bowed down to him.
But that's not uncommon for people to do that to one another. When you go around to the Eastern cultures, if you ever have the privilege of traveling there, you'll find lots of bowing is done and lots of humbling yourself is done.
But you said you weren't sure it was done back then.
Correct. I'm just making a point of if you go and visit, so it's possible.
Oh, the possibility's there, but we don't know.
Right? So how can we be certain?
God would have to tell us.
God would have to tell us, and does he tell us?
Two angels came.
That's a narrative, right?
What Lot actually said is, "You're now my Lord."
Right,
So
and that just means essentially
someone that's higher.
you're esteeming someone ahead of yourself. That's all you're doing in that case.
It's not even the word, not even the capital of Lord.
Correct. Because it's not the Tetragrammaton.
Maybe that's what they were wearing.
Yeah.
Those are the letters that the priests used because they were too afraid to spell the name of Yehovah. And because there's a passage that says if you get his name wrong, you're going to be cursed. So they didn't want to spell out the whole name, so they eliminated all the vowels and just used particular consonants as an abbreviation, and that was going to save them from ever misusing the name of the Lord and having the curse brought upon them. So none of the manuscripts have the full name of God written out. It all has the initials that are abbreviations, and it's called a tetragrammaton. So, God doesn't reveal to us here that Lot knew yet that these were messengers from the Lord. Angels, or even if they were just men with divine powers at the moment, not even angels. He doesn't know this yet. You follow?
He sees them as innocent men coming into a city that was full of wickedness, and his job
They're going to go and
was to protect them.
That's right.
And their plan probably seemed pretty terrifying to him.
Right.
They're just going to go sleep in the square. He probably knew what would happen to them.
Yeah. The Lord sent us to destroy this place, and we're going to do it. Not we might do it. Not there's a chance. They've not. Remember what the Lord said to Abraham? I'm going to go down there and investigate, right? What are these angels telling him? We're still doing our investigation? We're still gathering information? Determined. The decision's been made. Will the decision be moved?
Well, has the decision been made at that point? I mean, isn't that why they would go to the open square, so that they would see what happens?
I think they've seen.
Well, there's a practice of doing that, but at this point, the Lord's decision's made based on the language of the words of the men who are speaking it. The Lord has sent us to destroy it.
But that
Verse
was after
13.
Lot had been set upon, that his house had been set upon by the people.
Correct.
They didn't know them carnally.
Correct. Oh, I understand what you're saying as far as sequence of events. So yes, at this point, the investigation, however, is over. The men have come upon the house. They've been blinded by the angels, and the angels are telling him the declaration of what has taken place. The decision's made. It's going to be destroyed. Time's up. Time's over. And what is restraining them from destroying the city at the moment? Why not just and it's gone?
Mercy toward Lot.
Mercy toward Lot. Why didn't God bring the flood when Noah was 500 years old?
Needed to float him in a boat.
Because of mercy toward Noah. You see, when we read passages like 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 7, those of you who are advanced Bible study students, you can look that back up and you may understand the pronouns now a little bit better in that passage. I don't want to get off on a rabbit trail, but that's a very commonly misunderstood passage, and I think these two episodes that God delivers to us give much more clarity about the answers to that passage. But in deference to the one he was going to have mercy on, he doesn't come in and instantly destroy the city. Why? What was Lot's character? Righteous. Dedicated to God. Living his life against the iniquity that was all around him. Doing righteousness and justice. His soul being vexed by the people around. Grieved by the people around. And what did he attempt to do? Did he say, they're just not worth it. Let's just go. He ran around to see who he could save, didn't he? But at a time, it was time up, wasn't it? No more running around, no more chasing them, no more begging, no more pleading. And Lot had a difficult time going out, didn't he? He, his wife, and his 2 daughters. And the angels take him by the hand. Who else did the Lord demonstrate he would take by the hand and lead? Lot's
Daughters.
No.
Son-in-law thought that they would have been willing to.
Yeah, but who did he already demonstrate he would do this with?
Anybody.
Abraham's the answer. That's right. That's what he told. Basically, he told Abraham, "Take my hand, and I will show you."
I think, and this is just a hypothesis or whatever, but I think why Abraham stopped at 10 people, and this, I can't prove it, is that Lot had 10 family members counting himself in the city. And Abraham would have, if there was only 5, he would have went to 5. But he knew when he had them all covered that maybe Lot could get out with his whole family. That's why the angels asked him, do you have a son or son-in-laws or daughters or other people, that Abraham had covered Lot's family in the quest.
Right.
He felt okay that the angels would spare his family.
Very reasonable hypothesis. How does it work out?
Only got 3, even out of the 4 that left.
Yeah. You see, he ended up with 4 that left. So one began the journey. What did the angels tell Lot?
Not enough.
Do you think this is a relevant example for us?
Yeah.
We can sit here and discuss it for a while if you like, or we can just trust that Jesus actually brought it up in specificity to remind us, don't be like Lot's wife, or you're going to suffer the same fate.
Did you say that in Hebrews?
No, it's in the Gospels.
Well, I mean, that...
Well, quite frankly, it's in every book of the Bible. But Jesus particularly spoke of this event, the man Lot, his wife, the episode we're reading about, and how his wife looked back and suffered the consequence that anybody who turns back is going to suffer.
Well, I was just thinking of the example of one who has tasted of the...
Oh, that's Hebrews 10, yeah. Yeah, or Hebrews 6, or we just keep going on if you're talking about the Hebrews passages.
Look back, there's no...
Yeah, you turn back. So, real important, this is not an unimportant event that goes on. God's demonstrating the reality of judgment that's going to come upon the wicked, and it's going to happen. He's also demonstrating the great benevolent mercy that he has to those people who are genuinely interested in intimacy with him. Disingenuousness doesn't buy us a thing, not even a cup of coffee. And God knows everything about our thoughts and intents. There's not a single one hidden from him. And we have to be very careful, very deliberate, and very diligent to not be Lot's wife. We may stumble and bumble along a little bit as we go forward, but the point is, guess where we're going? Forward. We may make error, innocently so, because we do it in ignorance, unintentionally, but we shall not choose to depart from Christ and choose sin in our life. That's the passage Carrie's referring to just a minute ago. It's very important that we get these messages. The Lord tells us in a lot of ways, the most important thing for us is to be in relationship with him where we will know him. Everything else is going to come from that. Everything else is going to come from that. And what Abraham and Lot are demonstrating are being men in their different circumstances who want to intimately know him. And as they do this, they will learn from him. And it will produce a life that is of understanding as they continue to grow, but it's executed in their daily lives and how they go about making choices for what to say and what to do. And the greatness is what great blessings that come to both these guys. Both these guys are well cared for by the Lord. Both these guys have been given the personal touch and mercy of God in their lives because of their response to his call. And as they respond in consistency with his will, then he performs exactly what he says he wants to do, which is bless them abundantly, wonderfully. That should be the essence of our lives. And so, we have been, matter of fact, I don't think there's anybody in this room that I know of that does not profess themselves to be a person of God. Why has he known us? What does he want from us? You see, this is not unimportant. This is the difference between what? Life and death. That's what God's demonstrating in this lesson. This is the difference between life and death. We can do all sorts of interesting things while he gives us prevenient life, while he's letting us continue on. But we can't change the trajectory of life and death. Those are established by God and they are immutable, unchangeable. What we need to decide to do is have this level of intimacy with him, this closeness with him, where when we grow knowing him more and more and more, we learn from him more and more and more. And it is our greatest pleasure to be pleasing in his sight. And if that's who we are, ahead of us is a future of great blessings. That's what's in the front of us. We don't know all the details, but that's what's ahead of us. That's who we should want to be.